Welcome to the Passionate Pioneer podcast. Hi, I'm Beth, and I'm passionate about supporting women who are feeling disillusioned and disappointed with their career and showing them what is possible when you follow your passion. Having your voice heard, finding your tribe of like minds, and being able to get support is so important when you don't know where to turn or who to talk to. I transformed my life from the corporate world to the coaching world, and I now empower women to follow my example and claim the freedom of choice to follow their heart, soul, and passion. So let's get started. Today, I am joined by Izzy Murray. Izzy worked in corporate law for more than 10 years, switching roles to try and find the satisfaction and happiness she was looking for. It never came. It was only after a trip home to her beloved Cornwall in the UK that she had an experience that was the catalyst of change, what I would call a spiritual turning point. She promptly quit her job, sold her house, and began to dream of a brighter future. With no exact plan in place, the only thing Izzy knew was that she wanted to be of service to others in a more productive and hands-on way. Following her instincts, she soon realised that her passion lay in helping people with their mindset, depression, and healing from the trauma of life. Extensive training in a variety of hypnotherapeutic techniques and protocols, Izzy now works with private clients and coaches to bring about positive and constructive change in her hypnotherapy for healing and hope business. Welcome, Izzy.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm glad I got through that introduction. It was hypnotherapeutic and hypnotherapy and all of that. Yeah, that was quite a mouthful, right?
I've got used to saying it. I'm at an advantage.
Yes, that's like a bit of a tongue twister, isn't it? Hypnotherapeutic.
Yeah. Hypnotherapy for healing and hope.
For healing and hope. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? It's a bit of a tongue twister.
Long on the email.
So let's step back and let's start with where were you when all of this started? The listeners want to know the story from corporate to coaching. So let's start
corporate
with
to coaching. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm very much the queen of sort of reinvention. Life began. I always wanted to be an artist. And going back to being a very young age, that wasn't going to happen immediately. So I was thrust into college to learn to be corporate. And so it began. And I ended up in corporate for many, many years and moved out to the Cayman Islands. As you know, we met there.
That's where we met.
And I trained to be a lawyer while I was there in a fit of madness, and spent 4 years with my head in books and went from being an admin to a lawyer and entered the corporate world for a number of years in that way. Yeah.
So
reaction number one.
yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. It's something I've never. Listen, I could pick up a lawyer's book and the first page, I'd be asleep I'd be asleep in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I frequently was.
Yeah. It's not a career that I ever thought about. I'm quite a creative person. And so I always went in I followed the creative industries. I
wish I had.
Hotel and catering, definitely not lawyer. But what made you go into that role of being being a lawyer?
I was working for a law firm as a temp when I landed off the plane in Cayman, not knowing what I was doing or why I was there. And over the first few months, I enjoyed what I did. I stayed in the same department, and I just felt I had more. I thought, if I'm going to be here, I've got a better possibility to do what I do differently. And so I put my head in my book and I started training. I already had a background in law. I'd worked in the prosecution service in the 90s. So I had some element of my qualification already there, and I was able to start building on it. And to be fair, it occupied my time, it kept me busy, and it really did me good. I can't complain. I did very well out of it for a few years. But was I ever happy? No, I was doing what was expected of me. My mum had always wanted me to be a lawyer.
Oh,
I think it was very much saying to her, look, I can do it. I hadn't gone to university as a student, as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old. And I think it was proving to myself that I was capable and that I was able to do that. But once I'd done it, I was stuck with it for a while.
right.
And it kind of kept me where I was for some time. But it had its good points. But was it me? No, it wasn't me. But it
Right.
led me. I mean, it took me right through to the end of my years in Cayman with the immigration situation there, and I was able to transfer to another offshore location. I went out to Jersey, stayed in the field, and transferred across. I moved across to become the client side. I felt I could enjoy it more if I was relating directly to the people I was working with, whereas I was one step removed as a lawyer. I was working for clients,
Right.
and I thought I'd be more useful if I was actually working directly to the client. So I switched sides, and that didn't help either.
Yeah, I was going to say the introduction was to try and find the satisfaction and happiness, but it never came, right? So
Never
you just
came.
kept scrabbling around,
Yeah,
changing roles to see what worked, and it
that's
didn't
very much
work.
it. Yeah, it was the wrong dynamic for me. It didn't sit with who I was. It didn't sit with what my values were. I found it very difficult. I noticed one of the guests you had on really hit the nail on the head the other week, where they talked about the time management and the time recording and that absolute commitment. We recorded time to every 6 minutes. And I can remember the very first time as a director, as a management person, having to ask somebody what they'd done in 6 minutes, and they'd been to the toilet. And they were writing down that they'd been to the toilet and justifying that 6 minutes. And I thought, there's more to life than this.
That's total micromanaging, isn't it? When you
Yeah.
go down to the minutes, but that is the
You're
corporate world,
charging
that is
out.
the lawyer world, right?
You're charging out at that time basis.
Yeah.
And the fact that every 6 minutes of my day was being recorded, whether I was a lawyer or a director of a trust company, it was very against my own dynamic and my own self-belief and in what good management and good service to customers should be.
Right.
And but it is the corporate world, and I fully accept that. It just wasn't my world.
Right. So let's spin forward then. Let's see what was it? What was so you moved from obviously the Cayman Islands where we met,
Mm-hmm.
then you transferred to Jersey
To Jersey.
still trying to find that happiness, right?
Still trying to keep a job, actually.
Still trying to keep the job. Yeah. And so you're in Jersey. So now tell us the next stage. What happened then when you were in Jersey?
So Jersey, I was there for nearly 5 years, and I just hadn't found myself. I was a misfit. They often called me the hippie, which I loved because it meant people could see me. And I don't look like a hippie. I've just got a very chilled out approach, I think. And although I do have that trained mentality as well, where I expect things to read right and look right. So I was a perfect fit for the corporate world in that respect. But I just, me was very different. The real authentic me was completely different. I was far happier painting or talking to crystals or just feeling good about myself and learning about a side of me that was so very, very different to what I did in my day-to-day world. And so I went ahead with it all. I kept looking for something more. I noticed I was getting increasingly dissatisfied and disenchanted. And it was paying off on my own mental health. I just felt very suffocated, and I felt like I was doing I was doing the suffocating. I wasn't. And I had this huge imposter syndrome in my corporate world because I didn't fit. And I think whatever I'd have done, whatever qualification I'd have gone after, I still wouldn't have felt 100% comfortable in that environment. And I was pretty good at what I did. And it always got good results. But it just didn't sit well. So
Yeah.
I'd started to feel worse and worse, and I really was questioning what I was doing and why. And I know this will probably make you smile. I came home to Cornwall for a visit. I came home to see my mum and dad, and I went into Lidl's. Very unusual situation. But the chap who served me, he was a young lad, probably about 23, 24. He was laughing and he was chatting to people and he was really pleasant. And he had a genuine, heartfelt smile on his face. And I walked out after paying my bill and burst into tears. And I was absolutely amazed at the reaction.
Right.
And I flew back to Jersey and quit.
There's somebody that really loves their job.
Yeah.
Right. That's found something that's satisfying, even
Simple.
Yeah.
The simplicity of working in Lidl's. And they actually said to me, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to work in Lidl's. And that's how I felt at the time. I wanted to feel that laughter and that pure, just absolute simplicity of your working life. And I also wanted to recreate a work-life balance, because that was the thing I realized I'd lost altogether. It was all about work. There was no me. And the little bit of time I could give me was not an interesting part of my life. It was a survival part of my life. And I felt that there was so much more to what I could have over the years to come.
Yeah, it's a similar story. The similar story is here. Lots of, most of the women I talk to, it's about the work-life balance, giving all your time and energy and effort into something that's just soul-sucking.
Soul-sucking, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And not in a way that it was even pleasant, soul-sucking at the end. It just, I could have given my soul to something with pleasure, but there was just nothing left for me, I don't think, in the end.
Right.
So I left that Monday morning.
Wow.
There was very little planning. I just knew that I had to follow my heart.
And then you started following the breadcrumbs of the universe, didn't you?
I certainly did, yes. And
I
they all
love this story.
All fell in my favor.
Yeah.
I gave in my notice, and I was very lucky to have 6 months then where I was allowed to stay at home and still get paid for it to finish off the end of my working corporate career. And living in Jersey in a licensed property meant that there were changes I had to make. In other words, I obviously had to sell the house to leave, because you can only be there in a licensed property with the right to work, etc., etc. So the house went on the market, and didn't know it at the time, but COVID was on its way, and everything worked out to the day. The trip back, the sale, the completion of the house, coming back, being able to have fantastic training once I got back in my chosen field that had been online. And then because of COVID, I was able to work in virtual classrooms, which had never been an opportunity for me before. I was able to train with some wonderful mentors all around the world, in Canada, in Australia, in America, because COVID opened that up.
Yeah, and didn't it
yeah, it absolutely did. And I'm still very much in touch with all my mentors. They mean the world to me. And it was a fantastic rabbit hole, because all of a sudden I found I loved waking up, and I loved getting online and learning and training and working with people that thought like I did.
Right. That's the secret sauce, isn't it?
It is.
Finding like minds and finding your tribe and doing something that you love, that you actually want to get out of bed for, that you're passionate about. Oh my God, is life-changing, is it not?
Totally life-changing. And I think it changed me as a person, but I didn't really look any different or talk any different. I just felt so different. I felt able to give more of me. I felt able to be me and be proud of it, because I was bringing value to other people, but in doing so was giving value to myself.
Yeah.
And it was a real eye-opener. It really was. And I suddenly realized I was happy. And I was able to identify it. I was able to recognize it in my eyes, in my skin, and in the way I moved. And it was lovely. It
Yeah,
was an
when I
joy.
talk about finding your identity, because obviously that's what I
Mm,
coach. You do hypnotherapy, and I help people make that transition easier, right, from leaving their 9 to 5. And I talk about finding your identity because it's absolutely right. I mean, you don't realize it when you're in that
absolutely.
corporate world that you've lost your identity, but you actually have. You've just lost
You've
that
completely lost
spark
it. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
life, right? So when you come out the other side, it's lovely to hear you talking about that, how you felt and how your skin was even,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah. I got a message actually online the other day from someone who said, "You look so much younger," and I haven't seen them for 5 years. Oh, that's good.
You
As I
do
head
actually, you
towards
do
the other
look
side
very
of
well. For our listeners, this is on Zoom. We're on Zoom, but you're only listening to the recording, but I can see Izzy. And she looks radiant. She looks radiant. She looks lovely. Yeah.
I'd
Obviously.
love to say there's no filter, but I think there probably is.
No, there's no filter here. There's no filter.
Yeah, it was an awakening, and it was just a joy to help others, and I get such a buzz out of what I do. And when I started training again, I did my first amount of training, and it was very evidence based, and it was very factual, and it was very in depth and incredibly intense. But I still thought there was something missing. And from a hypnotherapy point of view, I didn't want to just read scripts and do it quite sort of rigidly on this evidence-based thing. So I thought I'm going down the rabbit hole, and I did go as far down the rabbit hole as you can get, and I developed a wonderful relationships with mentors, as say that use different protocols. We have a spiritual protocol. We have all sorts of different protocols that were so interesting, and each one had its own benefit. And to sit in front of a client and allow them to speak in a way that you think, actually, what will work for you? What could work for you? Who's going to turn that light switch on for you? What is actually going to change your life? And how can I help bring that about? And when you suddenly see that light switch go on, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And when somebody looks at you and their eyes just open and you think they've got it, they have found that bit of them that I found in me.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful to have been able to be the facilitator to help them find that.
Gosh,
Because everybody has it.
Yeah, that's how I feel too.
Mm.
Showing people, just seeing women, just seeing them. Do you work with women and men, or just? So I work mostly
Men and women. Yeah.
Okay, I work mostly with women, but it's amazing, isn't it, to see that, to see those light bulb moments.
Men, funnily enough, are often the ones that have them easier. I find them more responsive in hypnosis. I find they go with me, they trust me quicker, and they have a wonderful experience. I absolutely love working with men.
Right.
And yeah, even the most skeptical suddenly find that they're changing, and that recognition of change in someone who is skeptical is even more magic.
Yeah.
Because you're not changing them, you're just asking them what they want, and helping them get there.
Helping them help themselves.
Yeah.
Right?
That's my tagline.
Yeah, helping them help themselves, right? I'm not here to do it for you. Don't want to be a cookie cutter version of me. No, you've got to find your own way. Let's just say
half of it is the belief. Half of it is the belief.
Yes,
the belief that you can actually help yourself. You can do something about this.
Yeah.
So I think certainly with my role is people don't come to me unless they're desperate. I wish they'd come earlier.
Right.
Because there's no need to get to that desperation. But when you get them to threshold, that's the change comes. There's no change without change.
Well, yeah.
So when somebody wants to change, you can help them, because
but I think that's a big thing, isn't it? That you have to get to that certain breaking point in your life before you can say, right, something's got to go here. Something's got to change. I've got to do something differently. And I think as humans, we have to, we're not very good at reading the signs. It's only when you become more self-aware and you start doing this work that you realize what needs to change, and you kind of trust yourself to take the next steps. But when you're knee deep and up to your eyeballs in it, it's very difficult. You need that unbiased support from somebody who's got the experience.
Right? You definitely do. And I say I've been incredibly lucky with my mentors, and to this day they support me. And I feel very, very lucky that I was able to have that relationship with people that knew who I was. and where I was going. And I do think it's incredible. I think it's so necessary to have that group of people around you that are similar, that are reaching for the same goals, or reaching for goals full stop, because it's a generalized thing. It doesn't have to be a specific goal.
Yeah.
But just wanting something better, and wanting to get there. And it's never going to be necessarily 100% easy, but my God, is it satisfying?
Yes, absolutely.
It really
So
is
rewarding,
worth
isn't it?
it. And I don't have a single regret, and I have a very different life now, but I don't have a regret.
No, I don't.
And I love that.
Yeah.
I really do. I'm proud of that. I'm very proud of the fact that I followed my gut. I followed my instinct. And I've made changes, and some of them quite drastic, but I don't regret a thing. And I'm very, very happy with where I stand today.
Yeah.
And yeah, very proud of it.
Let me just go back, because you talked about being skeptical. Obviously, people are skeptical of working on themselves and investing in themselves. They'll go and buy a coffee, they'll go and buy a new dress, a holiday, or whatever, but they're very skeptical about investing in themselves. And obviously you invested in yourself, didn't you? As did I. We both got the support, the coaching support, and we followed the trail. You went down a rabbit hole. I went down rabbit holes, as you do. But I just wanted to talk about, you talked about spirituality. So spirituality, obviously I was a spiritual life coach, as I am. It gets, people, spirituality, they kind of, I'm not sure, it's all woo. But spirituality, just go with me here. It's about it. You can't have well-being without some sort of spirituality getting involved. Spirituality involves trusting yourself, trusting the gut instinct that you talked about, your intuition, right? Having that work-life balance, having the gratitude, and following your instincts.
Absolutely. And I think that, spirituality is a very sort of divisive word, and it splits the masses.
Yes, it does.
But it can be redefined in so many different ways. And I think just trusting in yourself is a very simple way to look at it, because you trust in what takes you to what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And there will be a lot of fear in that. But if you made a point earlier about self-awareness, when you can actually pick out the bit that's fear, and yet you can pick out the bit that's leading you, and you're following, as you come, the breadcrumbs. But if you're actually following something that you believe in, and you're very self-aware about which bits are leading you through fear and which bits are actually genuine, it's a growth process. But accepting that growth is part of life, and allowing that growth, even with the fear, there's always going to be fear. But having support, having friendship, and having someone to express that fear to that understands it is key. It's good to be able to say, like, I'm afraid of this, but then go inside and find your resources and come out of it being able to deal with it and take it on. I mean, there are a million ways to do what we do and walk away from a world that we don't belong in anymore. I am perhaps, quite frankly, although I'm on your podcast, not the best example, because I seriously followed my gut. I didn't plan at all, and I don't necessarily recommend that.
No, you're the perfect person. Listen, there are lots of different stories. I mean, I just wouldn't recommend giving it all up to go into nothing. I mean, you took a golden handshake, and you had some things to keep you going for at least 6 months. Well, you worked out what you wanted to do.
Absolutely.
And if you've got that cushion of support,
yes,
then no problem. But most people don't have that.
They don't. And it stopped me doing it previously.
Yeah.
I would have been in a very, I mean, I look at that now, and I wanted to do this in the 90s. And I've always been passionate about hypnosis and what it can do, and the power of the mind. But I didn't have that opportunity then. And it would have been irrational. It would have been really quite ridiculous. And I would have put myself in a very difficult situation.
Maybe you just weren't ready either. There is such a thing as divine timing.
Yeah.
And there's certain times we have to go through and learn certain lessons before we're actually ready to do that, or we're open to the possibility of that. Oh, now I think that is actually possible for me. I can do that. Whereas maybe in the 90s, you were just thinking, you weren't so self-aware. You didn't trust yourself enough to do it.
I completely agree. And I think that I've got to that point now where I actually know that I've got something to bring to the table. I've got experiences in my life now that can speak to experiences that others are having that I probably couldn't have had 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And so I feel that it is the right time. I am of the right age. I am just exactly where I need to be right now.
Yeah. It's funny because you say our age, our generation. So we are Gen X's. We are Generation X, right, Izzy? And a lot of the women on my podcast and are Gen X's, or they are millennials, which is an X that they're in their 30s or late 30s. And I also find that the women I talk to, potential clients, are also that sort of age. They're in their 30s, late 30s, or their 40s.
Yeah.
And it's an age, isn't it? I find that, we are kind of leading the way here for the
women,
generation.
Yeah. And I feel as I'm a bit different to you, because a lot of the clients I work with tend to be in their mid-20s.
Okay.
And they're very confused.
Yes, but we do have a confused generation. We've got a whole world of young people here that have no idea. Unfortunately, some of the millennial parents have been, there's what's his name, Gary Sinek. Simon Sinek. He's really good TEDx speaker, and he's done lots of talks. And he talks about the fact that, some of these young people, they have no idea. They leave school and they go and get a job, but this is the generation that want to make a bigger impact. They want to do something different. We were the generation that just went and did as we were told.
We were.
Right? They are the generation that now, with all this technology and the world is open to them, they want to make a bigger impact. And they're not very good at being put in a box. We were put in boxes for a long time until we decided I don't want to be in that box anymore. Right?
I think mine was a crate.
But we do have this, these cycles, and we're getting away from these, or we're trying to desperately get away from these old, traditional, outdated mentalities of being put in a box and, doing the traditional 9 to 5, because I can tell you, millennials don't want that. They don't want, when I worked in corporate, to use a cell phone, you couldn't use your cell phone you just couldn't have business and pleasure together. You just couldn't do it. They just didn't mix. Millennials are bringing all that in, right?
It's very, very different.
Yes, it's a different world, isn't it?
Very different, but it's coming with very different pressures.
Yes, it's still confusing, right?
It's terribly confusing, and it's producing an awful lot of low mood, a lot of depression, a lot of mental health issues, a lot of anxiety, which, although yes, we had it, but we had it in a very different way.
Yeah.
And it's quite fascinating. I work with some absolutely gorgeous women who potentially a few years ago wouldn't have had these problems without social media, but their lives have been turned around, and then they're not as strong as you feel they could be and wish they were, and how they wish they were, because they're just struggling with the modern world, or the way the world presents. And it's quite hard to watch.
Social media's got a lot to answer for, hasn't it?
Certainly has.
You don't know how to deal with it properly. I use it a lot for business, but there are some things I see on there and I'm like, oh my God, it's just like a fake world.
Yeah. And I think it's just coming through with everything. I mean, I was talking to a client the other day about perspective, and I wasn't getting through. I wasn't giving a good enough example. And I'd watched a documentary about incels, and I asked her just to watch a clip of it and see whether she felt that was the right perspective. And it was interesting, because it was that light bulb moment, and she realized that that's what perspective was, that she truly did not believe what she was hearing on this documentary, and it was able to take it and apply it to her own situation, and realize that actually she could look at her perspective and change it slightly and have a completely different outcome. And so it can work, but there's some really bad stuff on television as well, because even that documentary is telling people all about it, which
right. Yeah, I don't know about you, Izzy, but when I started traveling at 26, I stopped watching the TV. I only get to watch the TV when I go home to my mum's and she's watching the TV, and that's it. And I try and stay away from it as much as possible.
I zone out.
I don't have regular TV in my house, to be honest. I just don't. I choose what I watch. I'm very careful. I'm very selective about what I watch. And what
I watch the worst things
brain.
possible. I watch the worst things possible to remind me that life is wonderful. I mean, I must admit, I got completely hooked on Love Island, and I realised that I'd done it because I was fascinated.
Imagine anything worse, is it? I don't like reality shows at all. I'm just like, why on earth would I want to be in your kitchen? I'm here in mine. I don't want to know what's going on in your kitchen, right? It's like, yeah. But I do watch some fascinating documentaries and interesting facts about things like ancient apocalypse. Oh my God, with Graham Hancock. I mean, that's just mind blowing, right? It's all about how the history books need to change and what we've been told throughout history. Some of it is maybe fabricated. But it's interesting, isn't it? When you're more self-aware, you sort of start to question things and you go, not sure if that's true.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And that element of truth is what I think comes into our world in what we do to help other people, because actually being able to separate out the truth and your own truth is really important, because we've been fed so much. The experiences that we've had during our lives have made us who we are, and yet they're not necessarily accurate, truthful, or something we need to be taking into our future. And I think just being able to stop on today and say, okay, whatever's been before is one thing, whether it's true or not, but I need to think, how do I get to where I want to be? How do I get to the future? What do I need today to get me to tomorrow in a way that I want to do, and a way how I want to get there, to be who I want to be? And that, to me, is the only question. There's a lot of therapy where you're going backwards and trying to have a cathartic release to something that happened to you, which is sometimes necessary, don't get me wrong. But I mean, I think the big key is, okay, so here I am. I feel a certain way, but how do I feel differently? What do I need to do to take me to the next step in my life?
Right.
Not why am I here and then ruminate and go backwards on it all the time, but just look at, okay, so what is my future? How would I like my future to be? And why isn't that the way my future is? What's stopping it?
Yeah.
And how do I get?
We're onions, right? Just got to keep peeling off the layer. And even when like you said, we're ever evolving, we're ever changing. Yeah. And so
allowing that to happen.
Yeah, you get to the next stage and you're like, oh, there's another bloody layer of onion I've got to deal with and take that off and then get to the next level. And there's another. And don't think that, very successful people that you see in the world don't have to do the same, because they do.
They absolutely do.
The same.
They absolutely do. And even with hypnosis, an awful lot of people use that to rehearse. Yeah, and that's the whole point of hypnosis, is looking at another option in the imagination and allowing those options to come from within. And that's why it actually works so well with coaching, because coaches are teaching a strategy and mechanisms and techniques, and they're working through a program, and the hypnosis attaches to it and makes it real.
Right.
In the imagination. And I think it's wonderful to see your life in pictures in a way that you're not really forcing it. It's just happening. And if you look at sports people, sports people will use it to rehearse techniques within sports. Gymnasts in particular, it's very dangerous jumping on the parallel bars for the first time and doing somersaults. But if you're rehearsing it for a long time in your head first, and your muscular memory comes into play.
That's what I call visualizing. Yeah. It's visualizing, darling, right?
Yeah. It absolutely is. And it's using the power of what's inside.
Yeah.
To bring it out. And it's incredible. But to know that we can do that, because there isn't anybody out there that can tell us we can't, because nobody even knows where the mind is.
Well, I love that science now is just backing this up, right? Yeah. That you can actually retrain your brain.
Oh, absolutely.
And I love that. I love that science has finally come on board with with the spiritual side of things, to say these things, and the hypnotherapy side of things, all the things that have sort of been not really, hugely talked about industries that, they make a huge difference. And they actually work.
They actually work, and it's just so satisfying when they do.
Yeah.
And I think just people's realization that there is stuff within their own power, if you like, although it's a strong word, but when they see what their mind can do and the effect of what their mind can do, the reduction of pain and things like that, people, but the effect of emotion on a human body and how you actually have more control over that emotion than you believe. So much that's invested in stress that can be taken away and stepped back from, to give you the energy, to give your whole body the energy to actually do the things that you want to do, rather than it being directed into this stressful potential threat environment that we live in. And that's what a lot of us are faced with and have been faced with in the corporate world. We've been living constantly in stress, in
someone else's shadow as well, basically, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Living
and that's not to say that there's not, there's people out there that are absolutely in the right place in the corporate world. They really are. It's just those that aren't.
Yes.
That we want to be able to help.
Yes.
Because there are some people that are fantastic in it, and it's good luck to them. I hold my hands up. I say, good, really go on, enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's not to say it's not a world for everybody. It's certainly a world for a lot of people, but there are those where that's
how I used to feel, Izzy. I mean, I used to just love it. I used to thrive in that world until I didn't. I just hit a wall at some point.
And I think you've got to feel okay about that, haven't you? It's that self-awareness again, where you just think, actually, it's okay that I don't like this anymore. This is not right for me anymore. And that's okay.
Well, it took me a while to get to that stage, to be honest, Izzy. It took me, when I suddenly realized, oh my God, I don't want to be here anymore. I was like, what? What do you mean? Well, what the hell do I do now? And then I just slowly started educating myself and looking into what possibilities there were and what came next.
And following your breadcrumbs.
And following the breadcrumbs, exactly. Yeah. But it took me some time. And then I had to make a plan. It took me about 12 months. I mean, we were on the other side of the world. You had to transition into a job. I didn't. I had to make a plan. I had to retrain, educate myself, have the experience, and then transition. And that's for me, I did it in that stages process. But we got out.
Lots of trust.
And trust
it is like an escape, isn't it? And we were talking earlier about regrets, but not to have those regrets and to know that whatever happens, I did what was right for me. And I'm even if it had have gone wrong, I wouldn't have regretted it. I would have then had to build in something else. Right. But I wouldn't have regretted it. And I wouldn't sidestep it. It's the right thing. It's the right feeling. And it's something I'm completely and utterly passionate about. So it'll take me through to tomorrow. Take me through to tomorrow, take me through to the future. And just go from there and see where it goes.
Yeah.
Without a plan.
I think we've touched on many of the questions I was going to ask. We've talked about I think we've covered most of them. And let me just finish on one final question, which is any advice for the listeners today about why they should follow their passion, which leads to their purpose.
Why they should follow their passion. I think the level of self-satisfaction that you get when you do is incredible. The self-worth is greater. And I think it's really quite incredible to be authentic. I think when you actually live your life in line with your values and they lead to a sense of purpose, and when you are actually living your life in line with those values, you feel happier. Because if you're living your life contrary to your values and you get up every day and do that, it's like being in the ring with Mike Tyson.
Right.
It's just a battering. But my biggest piece of advice is do it. Be who you are.
Yeah.
Simply be who you are. and breathe.
And breathe. And breathe. I've got a little plaque on my wall that my friend made me for for a birthday. It's a piece of driftwood. And I gave her the paint, and she's a very good artist, and she's and breathe.
And breathe.
And breathe, it says, yeah, which is great. Great advice.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us today, Izzy. It was a pleasure.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It's been interesting to chat and just share it, really. Just take heart. Go out and be who you are.
Yeah. Be authentic. Be you.
Yes. Be your true self.
Nice. What a great way to end. Thanks again.
Smile when you're doing it. People.
Thanks for listening today. If you would like to join me in telling your story about how you are quietly quitting your career and how you've got 1 foot out of the 9-to-5 rat race, or if you are a woman who has a story about already leaving the professional world to follow your passion and can offer inspiring advice, then please message me to get yourself booked in on an episode just for you. If you have a question for me or would like to know more information about how I can support you in one of my passion programs, please message me on Instagram, Facebook, or visit my website. You can also grab your free copy of my workbook, Your Passion Journey Starts Here, by joining my online community. And don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy this podcast and share it with your friends. Until next time, this is Beth Taylor at the Passionate Pioneer Podcast, signing off.